Well, guys, one of the most exciting shared comic book universes is going through a bit of a resurgence. And you may or may not have noticed it's been bubbling up for the better part of a year, but we are now hurtling toward the resurgence of the Valiant Universe. And here to talk to me about that are two of the architects, Mr. Fred Van Lente and Mr. AJ Ampadu. How you guys doing?
Great, man.
Great, great, great.
Well, first of all, thank you guys. Welcome to Comics Are Dope, the podcast. But thank you guys for being here and coming to share your knowledge and excitement over this new event. I'm really excited to talk to you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So, yeah, the Valiant Universe. So, just full transparency, I'm newer to comics. I started reading comics in 2019. The series that made me a Wednesday warrior was Hickman's House of X Powers of 10. And then I would do like I'd go on live shows and stuff during the pandemic where they're selling trade paperbacks and whatnot. And I remember one of the guys at the shop at the time, he would not stop talking about how the Valiant universe was his favorite and the best shared universe in comics. And he was going through Bloodshot and Eternal Warriors, and I think there was a Harbinger War trade paperback he ended up selling me on. But there were just so many characters, so many types of stories, and all kind of really tightly wound. And I remember being intimidated by it at the time. I guess just being so new. I'm like, all right, well, I know who Spider-Man is, I know who Batman is, but this whole world kind of being open felt like drinking from a fire hose. But now here we are, some years later, and Valiant's making again another resurgence. But what I want to know from you guys is what your experience or relationship with the Valiant universe has been up until this point.
Um, I guess I'll jump in. Firstly, if Hoxpox was your introduction to comics, that's quite a introduction. That Hicksman storyline is really fascinating. So that's great. So I love the fact that you're a new comic book reader because I envy you. There's so much real estate to mine for comic books, and you're gonna have a great time reading all the classics and reading everything. So to answer your question, I've been a fan of comic books since I was a teenager, or probably even younger than that. And the Valiant Universe was always my favorite comic book universe as a teen, just because the characters felt different, the stories felt more lived in, and I just could connect to them. Um, my some of my favorite comics were Ryan the Future Force and The Second Life of Dr. Mirage. And circa 97, 98, I used to read a lot of Valiant, and that was before I really was, dived into a writing career. And as an adult, when I started to take comic book writing seriously, it was almost destined that I ended up meeting a lot of the folk who worked at Valiant and being able to pitch them some of my story ideas, which took several years for me to kind of break down that wall. It's not easy to break into comic books at all. So I was just fortunate to meet the right people, and when I met those people, I was able to share with them some of my ideas. And landing, a job at Valiant, being able to write Ninjak was just a dream come true. To be able to write a character that you used to read as a kid, I feel like, if I could just yell back at my 15-year-old self, "You're going to write for Valiant one day," he wouldn't believe me. So, yeah, that's my journey in a nutshell.
It's nice. What about you, Fred?
Well, the original Valiant came out. I was in college, so the Valiant came out. The original '90s Valiant came out with that first way, like Image Comics, also, right? Like your Spawns and your like Young Bloods and everything. So I missed it. I really loved Shadow Man was my favorite, like original '90s uh Valiant character. I just loved anybody who could play a saxophone in New Orleans and then punch monsters at night in the face. I mean, who doesn't love that? Uh, I was more of a Marvel guy. Like I was particularly a Spider-Man guy, and so I ended up working at Marvel and doing Spider-Man and Iron Man, all the mans really. And I ended up doing a book with my buddy Greg Pak called Incredible Hercules, which was this book about Hercules and his teenage sidekick Amadeus Cho. And after I left Marvel at New York Comic Con, Hunter Goranson, who now runs Oni, was the sales and marketing guy at Valiant at the time. And he came up to me and said, "Hey, how would you like to write Archer and Armstrong for the new Valiant?" And I was like, "Sure, of course." And then I had to go home that night and go Google Archer and Armstrong, this book I'd never heard of before, which was this crazy Barry Windsor Smith book about a mortal drunken strong man and his Hari Krishna crossbow wielding sidekick. And ironically, they approached me about doing Archer and Armstrong because of Incredible Hercules. What I didn't know that current X-Men editor Tom Brevoort later told me is the only reason Marvel greenlit Incredible Hercules in the first place is that the editorial meeting, they were like, I don't know, Hercules and a teen kid, an immortal strongman and a teenage sidekick, who's going to want that? And Tom Brevoort said, oh, it's like Archer and Armstrong. Which was this 90s Valiant book I'd never heard of before. So Incredible Hercules kind of made me at Marvel, and then ironically I ended up writing the title that I didn't know inspired Incredible Hercules in the first place after I left Incredible Hercules. So it was very strange. So yeah, so I've kicked around Valiant a lot. I did a couple titles like Generation Zero, and then I did Ivar Time Walker, War Mother, and now a few years after that, I'm doing Resurgence with AJ and a bunch of tie-ins for that. Like we're doing a bunch of one-shots with X-O and Bloodshot and Ninjak and Eternal Warrior, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Now, so for those who may have missed out, I say those as if I'm not one of them. I'm absolutely one of them, right? So for those of us who missed out on the original Valiant, well, I did read Quantum and Woody. I found that much later. But for those of us who missed out on the original Valiant, what is it about that shared universe? Because it's a pretty popular opinion that it's probably the best shared universe in comics. What do you feel like is the magic of Valiant?
Well, I mean, just I think part of it, AJ, is, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I think part of it is that it's much more intimate, like it's much more contained, like both DC and Marvel. Like DC spans from 1938 until now and kind of goes everywhere, and Marvel has a similar sort of sprawling, talk about being intimidated by all the newness, right? Like you were saying, BJ. Like I just think that it's neat that it has this, number one, it has a very distinct beginning, middle, and not really end, but a future, right? There's the Rye, the 4001 stuff. There's the past stuff with the Britannia and the and Eternal Warrior, and then obviously there's the present heroes. And I just think it's much more sort of contained and intimate, and it just feels more real because of that. I don't know.
I would wholeheartedly agree. I think it's a quality over quantity.
Yes.
One of the issues with the big two is that they are so large and that they have existed for so long. And there's been several reboots, there's multiverses, there's all types of things going on, and it's not really accessible for new readers oftentimes. Valiant, there's been three, I would say, iterations of Valiant. There was the original universe in the 90s, then there was the Acclaim reboot in the late 90s, and then there's the current era that we're in that started with 2012. So if you think of 2012 to now, that's only, my math is right, 12 years.
Yeah.
And then, hey, listen, I'm a writer, not a mathematician. But yeah, so 12 years of storytelling, with a large slate of characters, but not every character has had an ongoing book that entire time. So
Right.
if you just wanted to say, hey, I just want to read Bloodshot, you probably only have like maybe half a dozen graphic novels that you would have to pick up, and you'd be able to read the entire Bloodshot story. I just reread all of Ninjak and reread all of Shadow Man just to prepare for these stories that I'm writing. And, it was really only about like, 20 books, 30 books each. that got me up to date with all the story. So that is good. That is not a bad thing. It's good that it's so intimate, as Fred said, and you can, it's accessible for new readers. In addition, I think that Valiant is just a universe that takes itself seriously. Like, they handle the characters with care. They don't, they didn't make a lot of the mistakes that I've seen other people make, where, they might put the character in storylines that they shouldn't be in, or there might be a lot of passing around of the narrative of the character, and the direction rather of the character. So it kind of gets a little bit convoluted over the years or over the decades. And once again, that's inaccessible for new readers. So I think it's just the intimate quality of the Valiant universe that makes it so good.
I think the other fun thing is that, and this has sort of been pulled, back and forth over the years, but the other thing that I really appreciate about the Valiant universe is that as opposed to having heroes and villains, you have protagonists and antagonists. Like, it's the morality of it is much closer to, I think, what we have in the real world, where, I feel like, there's an old joke when they were trying to sell the Batman TV show, is they didn't want to do it like the Adam West Batman TV show, where it's like, here's the milkman, here's the mailman, here's the Batman. Like, I kind of feel like that's like I think any of us who lived in the real world for any significant amount of time know that hero is not a job description. You know what I mean? Like, anyone who walks around saying, I'm a hero, like, that's the person you should be worried about, and I think that what's cool about the Valiant characters is that they have their own goals and interests, and their adventures are really interesting, but it's never this like clear cut, we're on the side of the angels and you're on the side of the devils. It's never this black and white, good, evil stuff. It's always shades of gray. And just personally, as a reader, I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Great point.
So I got to check out Archer and Armstrong, Assassination #1, which by the time you guys hear this is out on newsstands and has been for, I say newsstands, it's at your local comic shop. It's in the direct market.
Spinner rack.
It's in your spinner rack where you get your funny books.
Right. But it's in stores now. It has been for a few weeks, but that was my first Valiant book, right? And so I'm reading Archer and Armstrong, and for me, it was like, I felt like it was part Quantum and Woody, part National Treasure.
Right.
With like,
thank you for saying that.
no problem.
High praise.
But what I liked about it was, like, I'm getting their story and this sort of adventure that they're on, learning, getting all of this sort of, I don't know, it's historical fiction, right? So we're getting a lot of information about like the states and how America came to be the way it is today, through this lens. But at the same time, as I'm like sort of learning about this Valiant America, we're also seeing these other characters that are kind of, I'm dropped right in the middle of their story.
Right.
It doesn't feel like I'm in the middle of their story and I'm lost. Good. But I do feel like I'm getting clues along the way. And, it's almost like when you're on the subway and it's like, okay, there's a stop here. Maybe I'll check that out next time I'm on. But right now I'm going to work, like that's right. How it feels like, okay, I'm peeking out the window and there are all these other avenues I can take, but here's the story we're in. And I think that's what I liked about it. Like, it was, I don't know, I guess a hallmark of a lot of like older Marvel comics was like, oh, we're reading Spider-Man and Daredevil might show up. Well, for more there, read Daredevil #4 right. Or whatever. And this kind of feels like that, but the whole world is like that. And I thought that was cool.
That's awesome to hear. Thank you. Yes, that's exactly what I was going for. I'm glad we're all on the same page.
Oh. So, yeah, so I guess you mentioned it, AJ, that Valiant has sort of had 3 iterations there. The original 90s Valiant, late 90s Valiant, and then 2012 to now. With all of these sort of, because even now, while we're keeping the same continuity, the talk in the shop is like, oh, wait, Valiant's coming back again, right? What do you feel like the challenges are with bringing Valiant to the forefront again, even as like consciousness is there, people know what Valiant is or was or has represented in the past, but at least at my shop, it feels like there's like some kind of skepticism, whether it's like business decisions, I don't know. But what kind of pressure do you feel, or what do you feel like you need to deliver in this new
Well,
iteration?
me specifically, I feel like I'm standing in the shadow of giants. I
Mm,
mean, even Fred, he's a writer who I've read his books before even meeting him or even being a writer. So that puts me in a position where like I have to live up to writers who have come before me who have done exceptionally well. In the one of the reasons the Valiant 2012 reboot was so successful was that the creative teams were really good. Vendetti and Matt Kent and Dysart, like these guys did a really good bang up job like crafting these worlds and reimagining these classic comic book characters for a new generation. So being a new writer to mainstream comics and having to, I don't want to say compete, but like say live up to those standards is the thing that's most challenging for me. I think what's challenging for Valiant and Alien books is bringing back the readers who have been scorned, who feel that there's been dropped storylines or mishandling of the characters business wise. So bring those readers back, and also bringing in new readers. So you have to do that simultaneously, right? And what new readers want is different than what the old readers want. So even formatting the books, right? I think Alien books initially wanted to do more maxi books, not smaller floppies, but they wanted to do larger books. But turns out that the original Valiant fans didn't want that. So that was a decision that had to be made, right? So that's some of the challenges is adapting to what your fans want, but also stepping forth with a bold vision and hoping that the vision that you create gets people to latch onto it and ultimately buy comics, which is really what we're here to do.
Absolutely.
got you. So, and Fred, you've been around, right? You've been writing in this Valiant universe for some time now. So kind of seeing it through this new iteration, what do you feel like you're bringing to it, or I guess aiming to bring out through this next sort of wave?
Yeah, I mean, building on what AJ was saying, I think the challenge is that there were a few years there, and obviously the COVID pandemic was part of that, where the titles laid a little fallow, like they weren't bringing out a lot of titles very frequently. Like it was like one title a month here and there for a couple years, and I think people had this perception that Valiant went away. And so part of the challenge is to sort of tell people this isn't a reboot. It's a continuation of what the continuity from 2012. But yeah, now we're doing multiple titles. Now all the characters are getting involved, and we're really trying to build something really cool with this universe. And I think that's where you see this energy and enthusiasm coming from the fans.
Yeah, and so with that, right, I'm reading Archer and Armstrong, and there's a page, sort of ad in the middle, like, hey, we're on the road to the resurgence of the Valiant universe. And I was a little surprised to be like, oh, snap. There have been titles going on like basically all year leading up to this resurgence. Because like I guess maybe just the word resurgence makes it seem like, okay, well, we're starting fresh right here. Right. Yeah. And I think it's going to be a great jumping in point. But there is also the story so far. What can you tell us, like, to get fans caught up to maybe where we're going?
Well, I'll pass that up to AJ because a lot of that track was laid down in his Valiant series.
Well, actually, I didn't write
on the spinner racks now.
Well, actually, I didn't do Valiant. That was Ryan Cady who did.
Valiant. Oh, is that Ryan? Oh,
yeah. No, it's okay. No, it's fine. But I mean, I guess, the first, I think, official launch of the Resurgence was the Valiant Valentine's Day special that came out in February, and I guess that was actually technically, according to the checklist, I believe that was the first book in the road to Resurgence. But I think in order to catch up, there's a lot to catch up on in terms of every character's specific story. But in the larger Valiant universe, I think everything is pretty well explained within the context of the Resurgence comic. I don't think you have to do a bunch of homework. I think one of the things that I try to do with Ninjak vs. Roku and Shadow Man is I try to write it in a way where if you've never read a book from these characters before, you could kind of jump in. I mean, it opens up with a recap on the inner cover, kind of gives you an idea who the character is. And of course, you're not going to understand every single, plot line or reference or Easter egg or whatnot. But I think you certainly can jump in at any of these comics. I mean, you jumped in at Assassination, and that's not even the first A&A book, and you were able to enjoy it. So I think that all the stuff that we're doing right now has that jumping on point kind of feel to it, where you can definitely read it without knowing too much.
Yeah,
for
sure.
And what's fun is that like each one of the Valiant titles, that's another cool thing about the universe is that, like you're saying, whether you're like Bloodshot or X-O Manowar or Ninjak, those are all radically different genres, right? Those are, military versus science fiction versus, like a super spy, what if James Bond and Batman were the same guy, right? Like that's the fun thing about Ninjak. And I think that we do try to keep all the stuff self-contained. And so that's why when you have a series like Resurgence that puts all the characters into one arena, it's super special. It's not like, Spider-Man and Wolverine have been friends for 10 years. You know what I mean? It's sort of a special occasion.
One thing that I think is cool about the Resurgence era, if you will, is that Alien's been doing a great job of just pumping out all these 2012 collections or collections of the books that started in 2012, so that like there really is a push to sort of catch up with the continuity and see what the story is so far. And so with that 2012 reboot, having so much energy around it, like I said, the way people talk about it, like, no, this is the best stuff. So I think it's really cool that they're like, no, and yes, that is the best stuff, and it still stands, and we're continuing that. So it really does feel like I said, with Archer and Armstrong being my first title, like not only do I have like a cool path to go down, but there's also a lot of history I get to catch up on and be excited about. So
like I said, Brian, I envy you because I wish I had just started reading comics in 2019, because then there's an entire world, a vast world of amazing comics that you're going to get to read. And the fact that Alien did take the time to re-release all of those books makes great sense. I actually want them because the way the spines line up is so cool. I want to like collect the entire set. But that is some really amazing comic book work that people are going to be able to jump into and recognize how cool this universe is. And once again, you wouldn't be able to collect all of Marvel and DC like that easily in just like, with 12 or however many volumes. So just the fact that we can kind of get all that together is really great. And yeah, a lot of those will catch you up, or at least get your boots wet, and if you will, in regards to the Valiant storylines, and kind of a jumping on point that will allow you to kind of figure out what other stories you want to read more. So then you can still continue collecting. And I hope that Alien does another the second generation of those sets, so that people can continue buying them, because I think it's definitely super cool stories, and I believe they're really hard to collect a lot of those and find them, and that's one of the reasons why they reprinted them, because they were certain things were out of print or just challenging to collect.
Now, Fred, you talked about how you both have talked about how the series generally you try to keep them self-contained. So if you want to just read Bloodshot or A&A, you can do that, right? But with this, you've got a sort of crossover. You're bringing a bunch of action figures into this sandbox to play with. What has been, or what have been, your favorite characters to work on that maybe you don't normally get to?
Oh, that's a great question. X-O has been weirdly fun. I'd never written him before. He's kind of the flagship character, and I hadn't really given much thought, but I did write Conan the Barbarian for 2.5 years for Dark Horse, and I just write, like X-O Manowar is just a great concept, which is what if Conan got the Iron Man armor? Like it's straightforward. You have a Dark Ages warrior with alien age technology, and it's just a great combination. It's like, you know, chocolate and peanut butter. It just goes really well. I've gotten a huge. I was writing X-O, or I was doing a Resurgence X-O scene earlier today. It's just and now they I don't know if it's Becky, Cloonan, or Matkin or whoever, but now his armor talks to him, which is even more hilarious because you've got Conan arguing with this hyper intelligent AI that lives in his armor, and it's just chef's kiss. It's just awesome.
AJ, what's been your favorite to work with?
Wow. I have a thing where, you know, when I write a character, if they're not my favorite character, I find a way to make them my favorite. So, by the time I'm done playing with the toys, they all become my favorite. But I can tell you my favorite Valiant characters, I was always really into like Toyo Harada, and just like the ultimate, he's like the ultimate anti-villain to me. Um, you know, characters like Divinity, I always like cosmic characters, but honestly, I love writing Ninjak, and I love writing Shadow Man right now. So you know, that was fun. Roku was a character who I really didn't. It's not that I didn't understand her. I initially didn't know what to do with her, and I spent a lot of time when I wrote Ninjak by versus Roku, making Roku a character that I could really get behind. And I found a story arc that I think I quite enjoyed writing. I hope people like it when it all wraps up next month. But you know, she became a character who I really became attracted to once I started really writing her. So yeah, I know that was I didn't really give you one answer, but
Nah, you're good. So this year honestly feels like the year of the suit of or the comic book universe, right? Like we've got Energon over at Skybound, Marvel's relaunching the Ultimate Universe. Like there's a lot of sort of miniaturized worlds that we're living in comics, and it feels great because it's like whether you're into big superheroes, big two stuff, uh, whatever, it's like you can just kind of jump in and these are the 5 books I'm playing with right now. What I like about this, right, even with my limited exposure, is that, and one of you said it earlier, but there's a lot of different genres happening in the Valiant universe. It's like you get sci-fi, you get kaijus, you get, you know, medieval stories, dark ages stuff, uh, you know, like I said, historical fiction. Like there's just so many different types of storytelling happening, and which makes it even cooler that they kind of share the same space in the same world. Um, but with that, what's maybe your favorite genre to play in? Maybe what do you kind of find yourself naturally gravitating toward?
I mean, I'm a big history nerd, so part of why Archer Armstrong resonates so much for me is, you know, you were talking about Assassination Nation. I love all this the weird stuff. Like a lot of Assassination Nation revolves around Aaron Burr, who, if you only know from Hamilton, was such a weird dude. It's so much strange stuff. Like murdering Alexander Hamilton was just the beginning of his weird journey.
Right.
So being able to do a whole superhero story about that, or a whole you know, comic book kind of national treasure adventure story about that, and there's demons and pirates and ninja nuns, and, you know, what lurks beneath the Star Crypt in the U.S. Capitol, which I've been to. There is an actual Star Crypt in the basement of the U.S. Capitol. That's not made up.
Wow.
It just amuses the heck out of me.
Yeah, no, that it resonated with me. I don't know, I guess just luck of the draw or luck of the click. That just
Right.
happens to be the book that I clicked on first. But my family and I were big on the National Treasure movies, like
Yeah.
the idea of like this sort of historical scavenger hunt. And so reading that issue, I was like, yo, and then you started in the Outer Banks, North Carolina. I live in Raleigh. Our
Oh,
family
there you go.
vacation was to the Outer Banks this year. So it's like, oh, snap. Like, so there's a lot of just
They were
serendipitous things happening
heavily
there.
into pirates into that part of the world.
Yes, that's so super aside. we were in Kerala, the Outer Banks, and one of the big attractions in Kerala is seeing these wild horses. There's
Yes.
a big wild horse population there, and the way those horses got there were from shipwrecks.
Right.
Like, and then so for a while, the Outer Banks, those bands, like there was just horses all over the place, and then they deemed them a nuisance, and so they were like killing the horses. Now the horse population is up to like 160, and they like very closely monitor the births and trying to build that population back up. But that was the coolest thing, just seeing horses on a beach. Like,
I think
crazy.
can't you go like camping there? Like, isn't there like is it like a state park or something, or is it just like they're like, nope, still give the horses their space?
Yeah, so it's like it's weird because the area where the horses are is a residential area. Like you can live there. And then they do these like dune tours, so you can get on a Jeep and they'll just drive you to where the horses are. But for the residents, there are all sorts of like ordinances, like you have to keep a lid on your trash can, and if you feed a horse, you get like a $500 fine. You're not supposed to go within a certain amount of feet of them, but they somehow coexist on the island.
It's working.
Right. Anyway, that was a super side note, but fun facts about the Outer Banks.
Good.
But yeah, like again, that's something that just stood out to me because it's like it's type of storytelling that you're not getting anywhere else, or at least not often. So I thought that was really cool about that book specifically.
Awesome.
And so I guess that does bring us to the Resurgence. I mean, we're talking about this sort of revamp, if you will, a reconvening of all these creative minds and bringing Valiant back to the fore. But there is a miniseries coming out called The Resurgence of the Valiant Universe. You guys are both writing on that alongside Becky, Cloonan, and Michael Conrad. And honestly, I mean, I'm looking at preview pages for the first issue. Lucky me. But it looks really cool. Again, it's like all these different characters, some that I know, like some that I've seen before, some that I've not. But this sort of clashing of worlds. What can you tell us about the story of the Resurgence?
I was gonna let Fred handle that one just because
I was gonna handle it.
Okay, I can set it up. So in the Valiant universe, there's a character named Dr. Silk, and you can think of him as this almost like a mad scientist. I believe he came around in like the earliest century, if I'm not mistaken. But he basically created a way to clone himself and also transport his consciousness into his clones. So essentially, it's kind of like a way to hack immortality almost, because you can keep uploading your consciousness into another clone and continue to live on. So he is a villain that exists across several timelines in the Valiant universe. He's in the future timeline, in the 4001 era with Rai and what have you. So he's definitely a villain who's integral to all of the Valiant comics, and he was also a villain from the original 90s Valiant universe as well. So he's kind of like the main villain, if you will, of this storyline. But in typical Valiant fashion, he's not really a villain, because what he's done is he's found a way to end death and also end sickness. And he's found a way to do this by draining life energy from a place called the Faraway, which is, if you're an A&A fan, you know what the Faraway is. And I'm sure Fred can explain it a little bit more, but I've always thought of it as kind of like this Garden of Eden, almost like land before time kind of area, where it's like a prehistoric place, but it's weird, like the flowers are made of crystal and things, and like science and magic almost doesn't work the same way over there. So
almost like a
Dr.
space station, but it's not in space but in time. It's its own sort of self-contained pocket universe.
Yeah, exactly. And by siphoning energy from this place, Dr. Silk has found a way to reverse the effects of death and disease, and he's become somewhat of a hero, or almost a political figure. And it kind of creates a schism not only in humanity in the world, but also amongst our heroes, where some of the heroes are actually with Dr. Silk and some of them are not. Some of them still recognize him as a villain. Other people are saying, well, now wait a minute, he's actually helping the world. So it's almost like a philosophical debate turned superhero story. Like how would the world react if death went away? How would people, how would this change? And everything from the laws of magic to to politics to science, how are these things affected by this concept? And this is kind of the idea that we're playing around with the Resurgence. And I think the first issue is kind of a meaty issue. You do have 4 writers contributing to it, and I think the reason for it is because we are getting these different perspectives on this phenomenon. And the artwork was really amazing when I saw those final pages. So I think everything's pretty well laid out in that first issue, and I think that it's, once again, if you're looking for something different, if you're looking for a superhero storyline that isn't cliche, I think when I hear people complaining about the other superhero, events, they seem to be a bit cliche. They seem to be a bit, tired. There are tie-ins with this storyline, but the tie-ins, I find that Valiant handles tie-ins really well because I feel like they're really significant in terms of adding to the story. So I know that if Fred's handling the tie-ins, they're going to be great because he's an excellent writer. So I'm sure it's going to really fill in those pieces of the story. I don't know if Fred, if you want to elaborate a little bit more on the Resurgence.
Yeah, I mean, so the tie-ins, there's one for Ninjak, one for X-O, one for Eternal Warrior, and one for Bloodshot. And it's like the story is so big that we can't contain it in a single miniseries, like you've heard of this all before, but it's really cool, our ability to sort of tease out how the events are affecting some of our main characters. But yeah, I mean, basically Dr. Silk ends death that causes massive ramifications both in sort of normal society. Think about how much of our world is constrained by our mortality and based on our mortality, but also it really throws a grenade in the middle of the sort of the superpowered universe and superpowered community, because there's so many number one, Dr. Silk is known by many of the heroes just as a straight up villain, and they're not gonna, they wouldn't believe him if he said their hair was on fire, So they're not gonna be down with this at all. But on the other hand, there's a bunch of characters, again, this is sort of what I was saying earlier about the characters being shades of gray. There are the characters who think getting rid of death is a pretty awesome idea. Why would you have a problem with that? What's wrong with you? So we have an uncivil war, if you'll forgive the term, where the battle line's been drawn and it pits the heroes against each other, but I think in a really natural, organic way.
Yeah, no, it looks really cool, right? Like I said, I'm looking at preview art. So listeners, I don't know what to tell you except to go grab it, right? The book is in stores on September 18th. But what I like about it, like I said, it's like this convergence of worlds. I was trying to avoid the term uncivil war because I didn't want to spoil it, but you did it, so it works. now we can bring up the comparisons, right? But no, it again, me as a new reader, I'm reading this like, what's going to happen? I think one of the things that causes superhero events in other universes to feel tired is this feeling that, no matter what happens over the course of these 4, 5, 6 issues, the status quo is going to be returned back to whatever it was before I started reading it. And it's like, maybe there's a twist, maybe, I don't know, somebody becomes a vampire and they'll be a vampire for another year, but eventually everybody comes back to home base, right? I think with this, what's exciting, exactly. But what's exciting about this for me is, one, I don't know about the status quo that whatever was ahead of me, but also it just doesn't feel like things can just simply return back to a normal. It's like this is going to happen, and then there are consequences for whatever may happen.
Absolutely. And I can guarantee things will never be the same again. You always hear comics creators saying, but in this case, we are 100% backing it up.
Nice, nice. So, Resurgence of the Valiant Universe, like I said, is in stores on September 18th. Final order cutoff has passed, so that means for you, the listener, you're gonna have to like make your rounds to find these books. So you can go online. There's online retailers you can order it from. But my point is, don't delay, because when it sells out, it sells out. Maybe there'll be a second printing, but you don't want to have to be that guy waiting 6 months for a trade paperback. So do your best to find yourself on the receiving end of an order. And if you already
pre-order,
you.
Definitely pre-order. Comic book shops nowadays, we were really living on pre-orders. It really helps for the demographic and everything. So definitely.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. You're going to want to do that. Because like I said, chances are you go to the shop. I mean, I know I've been to a shop several times where it's like, oh, we only ordered enough copies of this book for subscribers. So it's like, this book is coming now. Subscribe, call ahead. Hey, are there any extra copies of this on order? Put me down for one, right? Like that's how you're gonna have to get this series. And from my vantage point, it's absolutely worth it. One thing I didn't shout out were the artists, which there are, looks like 2 artists on this first issue. So we've got Guillermo Fajardo and Julio Azamor. And they're splitting art duties like several pages at a time. Then they'll switch. There are distinct art styles in this book. And I mean, again, I'm looking at huge dinosaurs and aliens and just all sorts of things. Like this book is a treat to look at. And I feel like artists somehow still don't get enough credit as to like what really goes into a comic book. But this book is such a treat to look at. So you're definitely going to want to get this for your collection. How is it, by the way, because you guys are part of an ensemble of 4 writers on this book. There's multiple artists. How is it coordinating a story with so many hands in the pot?
It's hard.
Well, it is hard. I have to tip my hat to Lisa Hawkins, our editor. She definitely helps with that. And once again, going back to what I said before, writing a story with somebody like Fred, who I admire, and I admire his work, it's intimidating for me because I'm just like, man, my pages are gonna suck compared to the other pages, right?
Oh no.
So I have to make sure not only that I'm writing up to the same level, so that there's a consistency across the board, but also that our tones match, and that the continuity matches, and so it is a bit challenging. But I think that Lisa is the one who is able to look at all of our scripts, and she has the direction of the story, sees the overall picture, so she's able to make sure. Sometimes I'll submit scripts, not even for the Resurgence, for other stuff, where she's like, "Oh no, you can't do that because this character is here and that character is doing that." So even though I'm not always aware of what's going on with the other writers, she's aware of. So she's the one who's able to guide me, so that when everything comes together, it congeals.
Nice. Yeah. Editors don't get enough love either. And it seems to be a recurring theme on Comics Are Dope. We talk about the role of comic book editors quite a bit here, actually.
Yeah.
But
super important. It's extremely important.
They're the traffic cops, because every creative team and every book operates on a different schedule, So it's not possible for every creative team to know what every other creative team is doing. And that's why the editor, needs hazard pay, because they're sitting there trying to make sure none of these, I guess better than traffic cop, air traffic controller is a better metaphor. They're trying to make sure that the planes don't smash into each other in the sky.
Right.
And they do a great job at it.
Awesome. So, all right. So Resurgence of the Valiant Universe, issue 1 is out September 18th. Go ahead and pre-order that. It's beautiful. Cover price on it is only $4.99. So do that.
It's a lot of comic for $4.99.
Yep.
It really is. And it's a 4-issue miniseries. But like I said,
I think it's 5 now, right?
Oh,
there is 4 and then a finale.
Oh, okay.
Double-sized one shot, which I think we just made news.
Oh, did we spoil something?
No.
Oops.
This is why you have to listen to Comics Are Dope, people. Inside information like this.
nice. So cool. 4 issues and then another double-sized finale extravaganza. That'll be awesome.
Or bang your buck.
Absolutely. So pre-order that with your LCS. I know I'm calling Fight or Flight as soon as I get off of this call. Actually, I'm not calling them. I'm going to email them because it's 2024. But yeah. So as far as any sort of a parting pitch, right? What would be your last words to get someone to check this out?
You've done a great job selling it. Thank you. It's just amazing action moments and amazing character moments. And I really think that like all great event comics, what we're trying to do here is give you both this sort of big tentpole, big budget action movie, while at the same time almost showing you every cool corner about the Valiant Universe and showing what makes it so unique. So it's a challenging balancing act, but I think we're doing a pretty good job at it.
I think that you should grab Resurgence #1, and you're going to be blown away by it because it's written beautifully to art as illustration. It's illustrated beautifully as well. But your interest is going to be piqued because you're going to be like, look at all these crazy characters. What's going on? Immediately order all the Valiant books right now. Get Arch and Armstrong. Get the darks. The dark soul side that Fred wrote. I love that. Get Ninjak versus Roku. I mean, shameless plug. You want to see some, assassin on assassin. If you want to see Mr. and Mrs. Smith turned up to 11, get Ninjak versus Roku. Then we have Shadow Man coming out in October, and in addition to Shadow Man, we have Tales from the Dead Side, which is kind of like a Halloween special. So kind of approached it with a Tales from the Crypt kind of idea, where we have several different really scary, creepy tales. Basically, the entire Valiant Universe has a bunch of different stories of different genres. We got horror, we got sci-fi, we got superhero, we got military, espionage. It's all mixed into one beautiful tapestry of storytelling. So I encourage you to get Resurgence, but also definitely check out the rest of the Valiant Alien books that are out right now, because I don't think you'll be disappointed.
What he said.
Awesome. So September is going to be fun. Resurgence of the Valiant Universe issue 1 is out September 18th. I'm definitely grabbing it. You should grab it too. Fred, AJ, if fans are looking to follow along with you guys on social media, where can they find you?
If you can spell my name, Fred Van Lente, that's me in Twitter, Facebook. I'm at fredvanlente.com. It's my Gmail address. Don't tell anyone. But just my name.
I'm much more complicated than that. My IG is earthtone_kingdom. So just look me up as Earthtone King. That is like my online moniker, and all my self-published stuff is under that name. Also, shameless plug, I got a Kickstarter going on right now for my Space Cowboy comic, Kimmy Cosmic. That's 2 Ks, Kimmy Cosmic. Check out my Space Cowboy comic. It's really great. All ages space adventure. We're on issue 7 right now. So I'm really happy about that. Got a bunch of different foil editions and things like that on the Kickstarter. That is live to the end of the month. So thank you, Valiant, for letting me plug my own Kickstarter, because I cross-pollinate a lot of those tweets and posts, and I hope they're not mad at me. But anyway, so yes, if you want to find me, earthtone_kingdom, or go to my website, earthtoneking.com, and you can see all my self-published stuff, as well as our Valiant Alien stuff there too as well. So
awesome. And before we go, I got to give a huge shout out and thanks to Ron from Valiant and Alien Books for setting this up. And Guys, it was a pleasure talking to you both. You're both welcome back anytime, and I'm really excited to see what's coming up.
Yep.
Thanks. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
No problem at all. Well, guys, I don't know what you're doing after you listen to this, but hopefully you're staying safe, staying awesome, and read something dope today. Peace.
Peace.